They said I needed a fresh start after the worst betrayal of my life. A new city, a new job, a clean slate. When I accepted a librarian position at one of the country's oldest universities, I thought I was running from heartbreak. I didn't realize I was stepping into something far worse. The library wasn't just old, it was haunted by rules, whispers, and things that shouldn't exist. I thought I'd be filing books. Instead, I was filing my own obituary, one rule at a time. In the summer of 2024, my life collapsed in on itself like a burned-out building. Her name was Marissa. We'd been together for 4 years. I thought we were stable, happy even. Turns out I was about as blind as the marble busts in the university. Rotunda, she cheated. With someone from our friend group, no less. Someone I'd trusted enough to share beers and bad movie nights with. I caught them. It was surreal, like watching a glitch in a simulation. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing I'd never really known her at all. I kept wondering, had anything been real? Every shared joke, every quiet Sunday morning. That emotional unraveling stripped me bare. Our friend group imploded, everyone picked sides, and I was the one left holding the grenade. I knew if I stayed I'd rot, emotionally, mentally, maybe even physically. So I started searching for jobs, anywhere but here. My degree in library science wasn't exactly a golden ticket, but it was something. I looked at places I'd always dreamed about. Seattle, the Rockies, even those desolate stretches up near the Arctic Circle. There was something appealing about vanishing into cold places, away from familiar ghosts. What I got, however, wasn't remote or exotic. It was prestigious. I won't name the university directly, but let's just say it's one of those, the kind with gargoyles on the rooftops, Latin inscriptions on the gates, and a student body whose trust funds could buy small islands. The library was the centerpiece of campus. Gothic spires, stained glass windows, a towering facade that looked like it had seen wars. Hell, it probably caused a few. When I got the offer, I didn't hesitate. I packed my books, deleted all my social media, and ghosted my old life. I arrived in early August. The city was humid, and the library stood like a stone ship beached in the middle of campus, weathered but defiant. As I walked through the archway and into the main atrium, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, not quite excitement. Just a pressure, like walking into a place that remembered every footstep. My first day was surprisingly normal. The head librarian, Ms. Langley, greeted me in the front hall. She was older, late 60s maybe, with a sharp bob of silver hair and a voice that had clearly shushed thousands into submission. There was something stern and unfazed about her, like she'd been working there since before the moon landing. She didn't smile much, but she didn't strike me as cruel, just deliberate. "You'll be on the main level to start," she said. "Ground floor. It's the most trafficked, so you'll get used to the pace." I followed her through the cavernous hall, past rows of desks lit by warm green banker lamps, past long tables carved from old cherry wood. The ceilings arched overhead like a cathedral, crisscrossed with ornate beams. The stained glass windows at either end of the room distorted the sunlight into ripples that danced across the stone floor. It looked more like a museum than a library. Despite its grandeur, the main level was just the tip of the iceberg. 2 floors above, 3 below, Miss Langley said. Most people don't realize how deep this place goes. Rare books, special collections, climate-controlled vaults, that sort of thing. Something about the way she said deep made me shiver. After a brief tour, she led me behind the front desk, where an old desktop hummed quietly and a stack of reference slips waited for the next shift. "You can get settled in," she said. "I'll bring the employee handbook and the operational guidelines shortly." Operational guidelines sounded fancy, sounded boring. I nodded and thanked her. She left without another word, her long skirt swishing quietly against the stone. I sank into the desk chair, adjusted my posture, and tried to look the part. I had gone for a dark academia vibe, navy vest over a crisp white shirt, rounded, glasses that made me look wiser than I felt, and just enough scruff to suggest heartbreak but not madness. It was stupid, I know, but it helped. The idea of becoming someone new, someone mysterious, someone cool, a librarian with secrets. As I sat there, something strange happened. Not supernatural, just oddly calming. The light from the windows poured in like warm water. The murmurs of students reading, typing, whispering, it created a soft ambient soundtrack, like rain on old rooftops. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a broken person. I felt possible. That didn't last. I heard it maybe 15 minutes later. A whisper. Faint, but unmistakable. It wasn't coming from the students in front of me. Their heads were buried in laptops and textbooks. No, this came from behind, from the stacks. At first I ignored it. Libraries creak, old buildings breathe. But then it came again. A hushed murmur, like someone reciting something under their breath. I stood up. I was the librarian now, right? This was my domain, time to scold some kids for goofing off in the back. I walked toward the shelves, my footsteps muffled by the old carpet runners. The first aisle was empty. So was the next. But the whispering persisted. Always one aisle over, always just out of reach. It was only when I stopped and crouched near the third shelf that I pinpointed it. It was coming from a book. I reached out, fingers brushing the worn leather spine. The book looked ancient, its cover cracked and softened by time. No title, just faint embossing in Latin, faded nearly to invisibility. I lifted it gently and held it to my ear. The whispering grew louder. My first thought, prank. Some student had gutted the thing and stuck a tiny speaker inside, like those musical greeting cards. A frat stunt maybe, some scavenger hunt. But as I opened the book, the whispering stopped. The pages were yellowed, brittle. There were no wires, no electronics, just ink. And maddeningly, notes scribbled in the margins. I hate when people write in books, it's sacrilegious, but this was unhinged. Ramblings, some of them circular, some vertical, like they'd run out of space and couldn't stop writing. One scroll read, "It's coming, what do I do when it gets here? They didn't tell me." Another simply repeated, "Put it back, put it back, put it back." Dozens of times. On page 66, no less. Cute, but that's not what made me drop the book. On the next page, in neat cursive, it read, "Please help me, Julian." My blood turned to slush. My name. My name. I stumbled back, heart hammering. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. Julian isn't that rare, but the voice had called from that book, and now it knew me. I wasn't laughing anymore. That was when Ms. Langley reappeared. She didn't look angry. She looked terrified. And she scolded me, not for touching the book, but for wandering. She muttered something about how I could have gotten killed. I thought she was being dramatic, but she wasn't. She took the book, flipped it upside down, and reshelved it without a word. Then she handed me a folded sheet of paper. "Read this," she said, "and follow every word." It was titled, "Rules for Surviving the Library." I stared at the paper in my hands, still dazed from the whispering book and the unsettling way Ms. Langley had just snapped into something between panic and command. The sheet was printed in a faded serif font, creased down the middle like it had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. Across the top, in bold capital letters, it read, "Rules for current librarians, main level operations, not policies, not procedures." Rules. Rule 1. Being a university library, We do not have a children's section. If you hear a child's voice coming from the stacks, ignore it. Rule 2. When closing for the night, if there is a student seated at the leftmost desk in the back, do not disturb them. Close up as normal. Do not look directly at them. Rule 3. If you hear whispering coming from a book, reshelve it upside down. Similarly, if you find a book that is bleeding, reshelve it upside down. Reshelving books upside down seems to work for most problems, actually. Rule 4. If you find a book with text written in blood red ink, return it to basement level 3, aisle 19. Rule 5. No books may be taken out of the rare books room. They may only be viewed by students inside the room under supervision. Rule 6. In the rare books room there is a book titled Dance of Death by Hans Hinn. It is believed to be bound in human skin. If a tall woman with dark hair asks for it, take her to it. If anyone else asks, say it is no longer in the library's possession. Rule 7. Once you begin employment here, you are required to remain employed for a minimum of 6 months. There was no signature, no contact info, just a list of oddly specific, vaguely threatening instructions typed on aged printer paper. I reread the part about the whispering book and bleeding books at least 3 times. It wasn't just a coincidence. That was exactly what I'd experienced moments ago. Ms. Langley must have seen the pale confusion on my face, because she said, "Just follow them, Julian. All of them. If you want to keep your skin intact, that is." Then she turned and walked away as if she hadn't just delivered a warning that sounded like something out of a horror movie. I slumped back into the desk chair, clutching the rules like a lifeline. My heart was still racing. My rational brain was doing somersaults trying to explain things. Maybe the book had some tiny speaker, or maybe Ms. Langley was playing along with a university prank tradition, some long-running initiation ritual for new hires. But deep down, I knew better. The rest of the day passed in a weird, disconnected fog. I helped a few students locate some academic journals, shelved some returns, answered a question about how to cite a 14th century manuscript, but my ears were tuned for whispers. My eyes flicked to every shadow between the shelves. I kept the rules beside me on the desk and reread them every time my mind wandered. When the clock neared 10 p.m., I realized I was alone. Ms. Langley had vanished and no one else was on duty. The library had thinned out. Most of the students had left for the night, and the warm yellow lighting of the day had given way to the cold white buzz of after-hours fluorescence. I began to pack up. I was halfway through shutting down the terminal when I heard it again. Whispers, same pitch, same direction, coming from the back stacks. I froze. A dozen explanations sprinted through my mind. More students pulling a prank, maybe an old vent, rattling or some residual sound, but it sounded excited this time, not like speech, like anticipation. I groaned, grabbed my phone, and headed toward the sound. The shelves were dimly lit. The main overhead lights had been turned off, leaving only a few emergency fixtures humming quietly above the aisles. They cast long shadows down the rows, and the whispering grew clearer with every step. Not speech exactly, but more like layers of breathy voices speaking over each other, a chorus of something urgent, jumbled, wrong. As I turned the corner, I saw them. Sneakers, just 2 dirty sneakers peeking out from the end of the aisle. I let out a dry laugh. "Seriously?" I muttered under my breath. "This is a hazing thing, isn't it?" I rounded the corner, fully expecting to confront some freshman dared to spend the night in the library. But when I got there, nothing. No student, no sneakers, no whispering. But I felt it, the tingle down the back of my neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. I turned quickly, heart thudding, just in time to catch a flash of movement in the next aisle. Someone ducking out of sight, long strawberry blonde hair catching the light. "Hey," I called, marching toward the next row. "You're not supposed to be back here. Library's closed." I turned into the aisle, but again, no one. That was the moment I pulled out my phone and dialed Ms. Langley, straight to voicemail. I hovered over the idea of calling campus security, but it felt ridiculous. What would I even say? "Hi, I think I saw a ghost, or a student, or maybe I'm hallucinating." Still, something wasn't right. As I stood there weighing my options, I noticed something else. The metal shelving units were older back here, built with hollow frames that left a small gap between the top of the books and the next shelf. Through one of those gaps, I saw them, eyes, two of them, peering directly at me through the gap, unblinking, wide, wrong. I gasped and stepped back. A second later, I heard footsteps, fast, frantic, running down the next aisle. I dashed to the end and caught a glimpse. Dark hoodie, pale skin, hunched forward like they were too long for their frame. By the time I reached the reading room, he was already seated, just sitting there, at one of the desks, hood still up, still. Crept forward, trying to sound authoritative even though my voice trembled. "Look," I said, "I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble, but the library is closed. You need to leave now." No response. I walked right up beside him. "I'll give you 30 seconds to pack up before I call security." Still nothing. I leaned forward to catch his eye, and that's when I saw the gash. It stretched across his throat, deep, jagged. Blood soaked the front of his hoodie, pooling on the open book in front of him. Thick, viscous. I screamed. My scream echoed off the stone walls and stained glass windows, rattling through the entire room. And then he was gone. No blood, no hoodie, just an open book. I stumbled back, nearly falling over the desk. My knees buckled and I sank into a chair, heart slamming against my ribcage. I couldn't breathe. What the hell was happening? I looked up, trying to orient myself, and that's when I saw them, standing in the shadows between the stacks. 4 figures, each of them bearing the wounds of violent death, blood-matted hair, torn clothing, vacant eyes. They stared at me, and then they disappeared, like smoke in a breeze. I was alone, except I wasn't. On the desk in front of me, the book sat open again, and now the text had changed, no longer in English. Symbols. Glyphs, a language I couldn't recognize, and the ink, blood red. Rule 4. I swallowed. Return it to basement level 3, aisle 19. I clutched the book to my chest. The shadows stretched long between the lights. My body screamed to run, to hide, to call someone, anyone. But the rules were clear, and breaking them seemed like the worst possible choice. Descending into the basement with the whispering book pressed against my chest felt like walking into the belly of something alive. The stairs groaned beneath my feet, long, winding wooden steps that narrowed with every turn. There was no elevator, no light switch. Just me, my phone's flashlight, and the air growing colder with each level I passed. Basement level 3 wasn't like the floors above. It wasn't even like the other basement levels. The ceilings dropped slightly lower, the temperature dipped a few degrees more, and the walls were lined with thick stone instead of drywall. Emergency lights buzzed weakly overhead, casting sallow pools of light that barely reached the middle of each aisle. Between them, pitch. The darkness there felt sentient, almost tactile, like it might brush against you if you got too close. I followed the shelf markers until I reached aisle 19. My footsteps echoed, swallowed by the weight of the silence. The whispering book in my hands had quieted, but the memory of its voice hadn't. Neither had the image of the boy with the gashed throat, or the 4 figures who had stared from between the shelves, so vivid, so real. As I arrived at the aisle, I scanned the shelves quickly. There were no specific instructions on where to place the book, no exact title to align with, just return it. I chose a spot on the middle shelf, an open space between two tattered volumes with fraying covers, and slid the book back in, upside down. The moment I released it, the air shifted, not in the way heat changes a room, but like a pressure lifting, an unseen hand unclenching. The overhead light above the aisle flickered once, then steadied. I took a cautious step back. No ghostly voices, no gory apparitions, just stillness. For a second, I dared to think the rule had worked. Then I saw her, hair the color of crushed strawberries sticking to her face with what looked like dried blood. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and locked on me. She stood at the end of the aisle, no longer fleeting or obscured by shelves, but whole, still, unmistakable. My heart seized it. It was her, the girl from earlier, the same one I had chased through the stacks. Only now I could see the damage. Blood crusted along her scalp, a sunken bruise under one eye, a gash across her temple that looked impossibly deep, and she wasn't alone. The others appeared behind her, a tall, slim guy with an Asian complexion and a shredded t-shirt soaked in dark red. A short girl with deep brown skin and a long braid, her left arm twisted unnaturally behind her back. And finally the boy in the hoodie, his wound still open, glistening. Their faces were pale, drained of life, but their eyes were pleading. They weren't just ghosts. They were stuck. They stared at me in silence. No screams, no moans. No Hollywood theatrics, just that quiet, unbearable sorrow that coated the basement like fog. I didn't know what to do. I froze in place, mouth half open, trying to think of something to say. I barely managed a whisper. What do you want from me?" The hoodie boy tilted his head slowly. Then all four of them vanished at once, like a switch had been flipped. The lights didn't flicker, nothing rattled, nothing chased me, but I ran. I bolted up the staircase, 2 steps at a time, lungs burning by the time I reached the ground floor. I didn't stop until I collapsed into the chair behind the desk, heart thundering, mouth dry. What the hell was this place? It wasn't just haunted, it wasn't cursed. It was designed. The rules weren't a list of anomalies, they were a containment strategy. And the quartet, because that's what I was calling them now, weren't monsters. They were victims, stuck in some metaphysical snare, repeating the same death in fragments, hoping someone would see them. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I found Miss Langley seated behind the desk, sipping tea like she hadn't just left me alone with the dead. "I saw them," I said, hoarsely, still not sure whether to accuse her or confide in her. "The quartet," she said, not even pretending surprise. "Yes, I suspected you might. You didn't put them in the rules. They're not dangerous, and that's not the point." She paused, looking down at her tea like it might offer her an excuse. "They appear sometimes, yes, especially to new staff, but they don't hurt anyone." I opened my mouth to protest, but she cut me off. "Not physically, at least. Emotional trauma, yes, that can happen. I didn't include them because they aren't an active threat. The rules are for things that kill." I stared at her, stunned by the cold calculus of it. "They want help," I said. "You know that, right? They're not just repeating themselves. They're aware." She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a list of reshelving tasks and disappeared again. Business as usual. But it wasn't. I spent the next few days digging through newspaper archives and online forums. I found it faster than expected. An article in the university's digital library database, dated 5 years prior. 4 music students, all in the same freshman dorm, all part of the university orchestra. Riley, the cellist. Hannah, the violist. Devon and Theo, both violinists. Friends, talented, ambitious, dead. Found on basement level 3 inside the library. Cause of death, severe wounds, no suspects, no motive. The article was oddly brief, sanitized. Digging deeper, I found a few threads. on obscure student message boards. Rumors, whispers. They said the quartet had been looking for a book, a special book. One that only revealed itself after midnight. One that could grant you what you wanted most. Fame, success, love, escape. But the price was always more than you expected. There was speculation, of course. Some believed the deaths were the result of a failed ritual. Others claimed the book drove them mad. A few even suggested they had been murdered by something that lived in the basement. But no one really knew. The whispers in the thread were like my own heartbeat that night, fast, frantic, afraid to land on a conclusion. But I did know one thing. They'd gone down looking for that book, the same one I'd already touched, the same one that knew my name. It happened the following Wednesday, late afternoon just before sunset, the kind of time where the world blurs, when the sunlight turns syrupy gold and the shadows begin to stretch, creeping quietly into corners like they're scouting for nightfall. The library was quiet, unusually so. Most students were out soaking in the last bits of warmth before the long haul of midterms. I was manning the front desk alone, watching leaves drift past the warped Gothic windows and trying not to think about dead students or whispering books. That's when I heard the knock-sharp rhythmic, 3 deliberate taps on the wooden counter. I looked up and froze. A woman stood across from me, not a student, not faculty, not anyone I'd ever seen on campus. She was tall, at least 6 feet. Her black hair hung straight and heavy past her shoulders, and her skin was so pale it looked nearly translucent under the flickering lights. Her eyes were a striking shade of icy blue, so light they seemed almost artificial, and her face was symmetrical in a way that was unsettling more than beautiful. Like a statue. Too perfect, too still. But it wasn't just her appearance, it was her clothes. She was wearing a dress, not modern, not even vintage. This thing looked centuries old, cream-colored with deep maroon accents made from heavy brocade and lace. It trailed onto the floor behind her like she'd stepped out of a portrait from the 1500s. I opened my mouth, not even sure what to say. No one else in the room reacted. A few students sat at desks, heads bent, eyes on textbooks and laptop screens. No one looked up. No one noticed her. She smiled, thinly, and spoke in a voice like chilled honey. "I'm looking for Dance of Death by Hans Hin." My stomach turned. I remembered the rule. Rule 6. In the rare books room there is a book titled Dance of Death by Hans Hin. It is believed to be bound in human skin. If a tall woman with dark hair asks for it, take her to it. If anyone else asks, say it is no longer in the library's possession. This was her. This was the exception. The rule's one allowance. My throat went dry. "Of course," I said, standing slowly. "This way. Quietly, please." She followed me without a sound. No footsteps, no rustle of fabric, just presence. I led her past the main desk, down a long hall to the rare books room. I held up my key card to the scanner. It beeped softly and clicked green. I opened the heavy door and motioned for her to enter. She didn't speak, just glided in, turning slowly in place like she was soaking it all in. I handed her a pair of gloves, as protocol required. She didn't react, just pulled one on slowly, deliberately, and left the other dangling from her wrist. I searched quickly. There weren't many books in the room, maybe 50 in total. Most were stored in glass cases or on reinforced shelves, temperature-controlled, and organized by century. Dance of Death wasn't hard to find. It looked no different than the rest. An old leather volume with ornate embossing, gold lettering flaking from the spine. But I knew. I could feel it. The cover was too soft. The leather too smooth. It almost pulsed beneath my fingers like skin, trying to pretend it wasn't. I turned around, holding the book with both hands. "Here it is, miss." I stopped. She was staring at me, No longer passive, no longer stoic. Her mouth was spread in a grin so wide it stretched unnaturally, exposing too many teeth. Her eyes had dilated, swallowed the irises whole, now twin black pits framed by white lashes. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the book. "Ah," she breathed, stepping forward. "My love." She sat down at the central table, in one quick fluid movement, like she'd practiced it 100 times, and placed her hand over the book's surface. She didn't open it, she just touched it. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, and then something impossible happened. She pulled off her glove. Her hand, bare now, hovered over the book. The moment her skin made contact, she vanished. No flash, no scream, no wind. 1 second she was there, and the next she wasn't. I stood frozen, the blood in my veins congealing. Then I ran. I didn't know why. Nothing had attacked me. Nothing had gone wrong. In fact, the rule had worked. She asked. I gave. She disappeared. Transaction complete. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just witnessed something ancient, something I wasn't meant to see, a reunion between a being and the artifact that anchored it, or maybe an escape. Either way, I was shaking, locked up the rare books room, double-checked the security, and returned to the front desk. I needed normalcy. I needed routine. I needed to not think about women who smile like broken dolls. But the library wasn't done with me yet. I was making my rounds, just walking the aisles to make sure everything was in order before closing, when I noticed something wet on the floor. A dark, sticky trail winding between the shelves. Blood. It pooled between the old wooden floorboards, darkening the grain. I followed it on autopilot, too numb to resist. It led me to aisle 9. The blood was dripping now, audible in the stillness. Drip, drip, drip. From above. I looked up. There, on the third shelf from the top, a book sat bleeding. Thick rivulets of crimson ran down its spine, seeping into the pages below. It pulsed, not metaphorically. It actually pulsed, like something inside was alive and trying to breathe through the bindings. I remembered the rule. If a book is bleeding, reshelve it upside down. Easy. I reached out, careful not to smear the blood on my shirt, and flipped the book. As soon as it was inverted, the dripping stopped. The blood dried on contact with the air, congealing into dark, crusted streaks. The silence returned. For a moment I stood there, holding my breath. Another rule obeyed. Another crisis. If you could call it that, averted. But the blood didn't disappear, it stayed on the floor. Dried, sticky. Impossible to ignore. Sighing, I went in search of cleaning supplies. I hadn't been told where they were. Of course not. Why would Ms. Langley tell me where the mop was? The woman who knew there were bleeding books and whispering ones, and still thought the best course of action was to hand me a single piece of paper. I wandered toward the back of the library, where the maintenance access was. Eventually, I found an unmarked door along the rear wall. I opened it, expecting a broom closet. It was a staircase, a narrow, spiral staircase made of old, dark wood that curved downward into complete darkness. No sign, no light switch. Just steps, disappearing into shadow. I froze. The rules hadn't mentioned this, not once. "Don't go down there," I whispered to myself, voice trembling. "Don't be that guy in the horror movie." I started to close the door when I heard it. "Julian," a voice from below. A voice I recognized. "Elise?" I leaned slightly into the opening. "It's me," the voice called. "Can you come help me? I've been stuck down here. The door won't open from the inside." It was her, the exact tone, the exact inflection. My brain screamed at me to move, to slam the door, to run. But my legs didn't listen. Elise? I called down again, hesitant. Yeah, please, I've been calling for hours. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and called her. The ringtone echoed from below. No. I backed away, ice sliding down my spine. I didn't need a rule to tell. Me, that wasn't Elise. The ringtone cut through the stillness like a scalpel. It echoed from deep within the stairwell, warped, muffled, distant, but unmistakably there. Elise's name blinked back at me from my phone screen, glowing against the shadows. My stomach turned. My knees nearly buckled. She had picked up. Julian? Her voice came through the speaker, clear, concerned. Elise, I said slowly, still staring into the dark stairwell. Are you at the library right now? There was a pause, then, no, why? I hung up. Whatever was down those stairs, it wasn't her, but it kept trying. The thing pretending to be Elise grew more frantic with every second I backed away from the door. Julian, I'm down here, it cried out, now sharp, urgent. Please, don't leave me. Then its voice broke into sobs, wet, choking sounds, like someone drowning and crying at the same time. I slammed the door shut and staggered back, heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The doorknob rattled behind me, then silence. Cold silence, like the building itself was holding its breath. I ran back to the desk, pulled open the drawer, and retrieved the rules. No mention of a stairwell, no mention of voices pretending to be loved ones. That made it worse. Because if something that dangerous wasn't on the list, what else had been left off? The rules weren't comprehensive. They were reactive, pieced together. And that meant I needed to adapt if I wanted to survive. I grabbed a pen, scrawled a new entry at the bottom of the list in my own shaky handwriting. Rule 8. If you find a Batisi-E, dark stairwell hidden behind an unmarked door, and hear someone you know crying for help, don't go down. It isn't them. I underlined it 3 times. Later that evening, I showed the updated list to Ms. Langley. Her reaction was strangely calm, as though she had expected it. I haven't encountered that stairwell myself, she admitted, sipping tea like we were discussing a misplaced reference book. But I've always had the feeling that something in this building likes to create new spaces. New spaces, I echoed. It created a staircase? It's not always architectural. Sometimes it's behavioral or temporal. The library listens, Julian. It adjusts, reacts to you, especially when you notice things you're not supposed to. That made my skin crawl. How many rules are missing? I asked. Ms. Langley didn't answer. Instead, she placed her cup down and gently held up her left hand. Her pinky and ring finger were gone. I didn't ask any more questions after that. The next week, I saw them again, the quartet, not like before. This time, they didn't hide in shadows or blink out of sight. They came during the day, fully visible, while students bustled past, oblivious. I was reshelving books when I spotted Riley, her blood-caked hair gleaming faintly in the sunlight, streaming through the window. She wasn't moving, just standing between the stacks, watching me with hollow eyes. When I blinked, she was gone. Later that day, Devon appeared by the study alcoves, his fingers brushing across the spines of textbooks, like he was still trying to study for a test he never took. Theo showed up after lunch, slouched at a desk with his hoodie up, eyes down. Blood still poured quietly from his neck. None of them said a word, but it was clear now they weren't just haunting me, they were reaching out. Elise stopped by that afternoon for her usual research session. She was a postdoc working on a thesis about Renaissance cryptography. Brilliant, composed, funny in that dry academic way that made her intimidating and magnetic at the same time. I'd started to look forward to her visits. As she browsed the stacks, I found myself wondering what would happen if something mimicked her again. Would I fall for it next time? Was it using her image because I was beginning to care? That thought scared me more than the ghosts, because it meant the library was learning me. It was only a few days later that the first outsider came in, the one who reminded me what this place really did to people. He was young, late teens, maybe early 20s, lanky with messy blonde hair and a hoodie that read Joe's Surf Shop. He didn't look like a student. He didn't look like he'd slept in days. I found him crouched on the floor of basement level 3, fiddling with his phone. "Library closes in 5 minutes," I said. "I know," he muttered, but he didn't move. "You need to leave." Looked up at me, eyes rimmed red. "Have you ever heard of the Book of Blood?" he asked. My mouth went dry. "Which one?" I asked carefully. "The one that bleeds or the one with symbols written in blood?" He blinked. "The second one." I swallowed hard. "They say it grants you whatever you want," he said. "If you really need it, if your heart's in the right place." I shook my head slowly. "That's not how it works." "Please," he whispered. "I flunked 2 midterms. I'm on academic probation. My dad said if I mess up again, I'm done. I need a win." I could hear it in his voice. That quiet desperation, the kind that makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. The kind that book loves. I nodded slowly, gently steering him toward the exit. "There are other ways. Talk to your professors. Get help. This isn't the answer." He looked like he wanted to cry, but he nodded. When he finally walked out the door, the guilt hit me like a punch. I had lied to him because the Book of Blood didn't grant anything. It fed on weakness, on grief, on desperation. That's what had drawn the quartet to it. That's what had nearly pulled me under. I realized, standing there with the library darkening around me, that I couldn't just keep playing by the rules. I had to destroy the book. No more reshelving, no more obedience. It had to end. That night, I stayed late. Past midnight, I went down to basement level 3, aisle 19, flashlight in one hand, the rules in the other. But the book wasn't there. It was gone. I searched every shelf, every corner. Nothing. I returned upstairs and pulled up the library's catalog system. I typed, "Untitled." One match appeared. Location, unavailable. Then it changed. B3, aisle 8. Then, again, B1, aisle 11. Then main level, aisle 13. It was moving. I stared at the screen as the locations blinked one after another like a heartbeat. It was getting closer, climbing levels. Then it stopped. Main level, aisle 13. I stood up, heart in my throat, and then the power went out. The terminal blinked off. Lights died. Only the red exit sign glowed faintly at the far end of the room. The library had gone still, but something inside it had woken up. For a full 5 seconds after the lights died, I couldn't move. The hum of electricity had vanished, and with it, any illusion that I was still part of a normal world. Only the red exit sign buzzed softly at the far end of the library, casting a dim glow that stretched shadows like fingers across the tiled floor. My phone's flashlight flickered to life, the cone of light shaking slightly in my trembling grip. Main level, aisle 13. That was where the catalogue said the book had stopped. I swallowed hard and turned toward the row of shelves. The moment I took my first step, the air changed. It was subtle but real, like walking into a room where someone had been crying. That thick metallic tang of tension soaked into the atmosphere. My shoes made soft taps against the floor, echoing off the high ceilings. I passed row after row of empty desks, the green lamps now just dark orbs on polished wood. There were no whispers this time, no sudden apparitions, just a silence so loud it pressed against my skull. When I reached aisle 13, the beam of my flashlight landed on a thin, dark line snaking along the floor. Blood. It formed a single trail, like someone had dragged a finger along the ground, painting a path. I followed it. Pit, pit, pit. The sound of dripping blood came from ahead, and then I saw it. A book wedged at the top of the shelf. Its leather was darker than before, wetter. It gleamed in the light. I stepped closer, reached up, and slid it down into my hands. It felt heavier, wrong. And just as I turned to leave, I saw them. The quartet, Riley, Hannah, Devon, Theo. They stood at the end of the aisle, all four side by side, their faces pale, but calm. No blood, no wounds. Just the expressions they might have worn in life. Hopeful, waiting. One by one, they nodded. I took a deep breath and opened the book. The pages fluttered like feathers caught in a storm. My flashlight flickered. Somewhere in the distance, a groan rolled through the shelves like the sigh of something ancient waking up. I reached into my bag and pulled out the lighter. I'd come prepared, but the moment the flame touched the edge of the page, the air roared to life. Wind, inside the library, blasted through the aisle, nearly knocking me off my feet. The flame danced violently, threatening to go out. Pages turned furiously on their own. Shadows spun across the walls. I knelt, shielding the flame with my body, trying to burn the page. But the book resisted. Then, in a sudden burst of clarity, I remembered something from the rules. Reshelving books upside down seems to work for most problems. Most I didn't wait. I took the open book, flame still burning along the edge, and shoved it back onto the shelf upside down. The fire caught instantly. It raced across the pages with a hungry hiss, orange light blooming up toward the ceiling. A scream erupted from somewhere beyond the shelves, high-pitched, guttural, inhuman, then silence. My legs felt like jelly as I stumbled back. The fire crackled in place, a pillar of defiance. The quartet stood still at the end of the aisle, now smiling, not with vengeance, with peace. Then, slowly, they faded, one by one, into soft motes of light, like dust caught in sunbeams. The wind died. The power surged back to life. Lights flickered on. The green desk lamps glowed again, and the book? Gone. Only ash remained, curling gently along the shelf. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I returned to the rules, and I added another entry, clear, direct, and perhaps the most important one yet. Rule 9. If the book of blood appears, do not attempt to read it. If you must destroy it, burn it upside down. Fire alone won't work, but the rule still matters, because that was the truth I had finally learned. The rules weren't magic. They weren't sacred. They were desperate little tricks, accumulated by survivors trying to outsmart something that hunted by pattern. The library didn't just have rules, it made them, and the only way to survive was to make new ones faster than it could change the game. The next few days passed in a blur, as if time itself was exhausted by what had happened. The ash from the Book of Blood remained for a single night. By morning it was gone, swept away by unseen hands. The shelf it had burned upon showed no signs of damage, no scorch marks, no scent, just empty space, as though the book had never existed. But I knew better. I'd felt the heat. I'd heard the screams. I'd seen the quartet smile before vanishing. They were free. That thought alone steadied me. Ms. Langley said nothing about the fire or the blackout. She simply handed me the schedule for the week and asked if I wanted another cup of tea. I declined. Was still trying to keep my hands from shaking. I went about my duties with robotic precision, sorting returns, assisting students, avoiding any aisle that even vaguely reminded me of where the book had last appeared. But the sense of calm didn't last. I should have known better. The library doesn't rest, it waits. It happened on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day that leaks melancholy into your bones. The morning started off slow. A few grad students wandered, in dripping from the shoulders, muttering about thesis deadlines and broken umbrellas. Elise stopped by just before lunch to pick up a few more Latin manuscripts. She offered me a soft smile, and I tried to return it. But she noticed. "Rough night?" she asked. "You could say that," I murmured. She didn't press, just patted the desk lightly with her fingertips and disappeared between the shelves. That afternoon I headed to basement level 1 to retrieve a misplaced volume on colonial cartography. As I turned down one of the side aisles, I spotted him, a student, probably a freshman, sitting cross-legged on the floor, phone in hand, earbuds dangling. His hoodie was soaked at the shoulders, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in days. I recognized that posture, that hollow stare. I'd worn it myself not too long ago. "Hey," I said gently. "Library closes soon. You okay?" He looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands trembled as he slipped the phone into his pocket. "I'm looking for something," he said. I waited. "I heard about the Book of Blood," he continued, voice low. "Not from the official stuff, the boards, the forums, people talk, you know." My stomach tightened. "I heard it only shows up if you really need it," he went on. "That it doesn't just grant wishes, it chooses." "What's your name?" I asked softly. "Jeremy," he said. "Second year, history major." I nodded. "What do you want from it, Jeremy?" He hesitated. Then, "A second chance. I failed 3 classes last semester. My parents don't know yet. I can't get my scholarship back. I need something to go right just once." It was too familiar, the way he said it. The way his shoulders curved inward, like the weight of everything was pushing him down into the floor. "I know what it feels like to want something so badly that you'd take any offer," I said. "Even one from a book that bleeds." His eyes widened slightly. "So it's real?" he whispered. I didn't answer that directly. Instead, I sat down beside him. The floor was cold. The air tasted like dust and old paper. "There are rules here," I said. "Things that can't be explained. Things that feed off desperation. You think this place cares about you getting a better GPA? It doesn't. It wants you to ask. That's all. That's how it gets in." I just thought, if I found it. He trailed off, ashamed. "That's what the quartet thought too," I said. He blinked. "Quartet?" I nodded. 4 students, all of them musicians. All of them believed the Book of Blood would launch their careers. They thought they'd found a shortcut. They ended up inside the shelves, broken, trapped. His face paled. "That's real. As real as you and me." We sat in silence. For a moment, I could hear the rain tapping softly against the high basement windows. The hum of the lights above us felt louder than usual, like they were listening too. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I didn't mean to." "It's okay," I said. "Needing help doesn't make you weak, but asking a monster for it does make you vulnerable. That book doesn't solve problems, it creates victims." He nodded slowly, pulling the hood tighter around his head. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the flicker of belief, the shame, the fragile hope that maybe someone had destroyed it, that maybe it was gone for good. "Go home," I said. "Email your professors. Ask for extensions. Retake what you need. Fight for your future like it's still yours." He sniffed once, rubbed at his face, and pushed himself up to his feet. He offered me a trembling smile. "Thanks," he said, "for not treating me like I'm crazy." "You're not," I replied, "but this place is." He walked toward the staircase, footsteps light, almost hesitant, as if the air might solidify around him and hold him back. But he made it. I heard the door open and close above. I stayed down there for a while, seated on the floor where he'd been staring at the worn covers of books older than most governments. The library hadn't tried to stop me, hadn't tried to lure Jeremy harder. And for a moment I wondered if destroying the book had shifted the balance. If the thing that fed on despair had lost some of its power, but I knew better. The library doesn't stop hunting, it simply changes tactics. I knew it wasn't over. Destroying the Book of Blood had been a victory, sure, a necessary act. But it wasn't the end. It was a pause, a breath drawn before the next whisper. The library had swallowed too many voices for too long, and it didn't. Just let go because one person struck a match. Still, something had changed. The rules, my understanding of them, had shifted. They weren't relics, they were tools, warnings etched in desperation by those who came before, librarians who had faced the dark and made it out alive, or at least long enough to write something down. Now I was one of them. And the moment I realized that, a new question burned inside me. Why hadn't anyone ever tried to destroy the library itself? Not in a literal sense. I wasn't about to douse the walls in gasoline and go full arsonist. But the thing that lived inside the library, that fed off broken people, that manipulated voices and memories and shadows, it was real. It was intelligent. And it was still here, watching, learning, adjusting. That night I sat in my car for almost an hour after my shift ended. Rain needled the windshield. The library loomed behind me, lit faintly from within like a sleeping giant. I clutched the steering wheel and thought about all the times I'd come close to dying, about the boy in the hoodie, about the voice mimicking Elise, about the quartet bleeding through the shelves, and I thought about Jeremy, about how easily he could have been next. The library preyed on vulnerability. That was its pattern. It didn't matter whether you were grieving, lonely, angry, ashamed. It just needed you to need something, and then it would offer you a shortcut, a story, a lie, a trap. I couldn't destroy the building, but maybe, just maybe, I could destroy the mechanism behind it. The next morning, I walked into Ms. Langley's office with a plan. "I want to bait it," I said. She didn't even blink. "You already did," she replied. "No," I said. "That was survival. This is different. This is war." She sighed and set her teacup down. "Julian, if you start digging too deep, you won't find answers. You'll find something that changes you." "Good," I said, "because I don't want to be someone who survives this place anymore. I want to be someone who ends it." She looked at me long and slow. "What do you have in mind?" I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. My notes, my idea. It wasn't a spell, it wasn't a ritual. It was a declaration. I want to summon it. Whatever's left of the Book of Blood. If it can move, if it can adapt, then it can regrow. I'll write my name in the visitor's ledger, in blood. Same way it calls to the desperate, but this time I'll be ready. She stared at the paper for a long time, then finally said, "You do realize if this works, it might not be a book anymore." "I know," I said. "But if it shows up, I'll finish it. And if it doesn't, then maybe I'll finally have peace." She nodded slowly, like she was weighing the ghost of some memory behind her eyes. "Very well," she said, "but you're not doing this tonight." I frowned. "Why not?" She smiled faintly. "Because you need to ask Elise out first." My face turned red. What?" "Don't act surprised," she said, standing. "This place doesn't just feed on your pain. It prevents you from living too. Make the call, make it now. If you're going to fight this thing, you need to remember what you're fighting for." I left her office half in shock, half in awe. She was right. So I sat down at the front desk, pulled out my phone, and dialed Elise's number. She picked up after 3 rings. "Julian?" "Hey," I said, "quick question." "Okay, would you want to go out with me sometime, like on a date?" A pause, then, "Yes, I'd like that." I grinned so hard my face hurt. "Great. After I possibly get attacked by a demonic book entity again, I'll take you out for coffee." "That's strangely romantic," she said, laughing. I hung up, tucked the phone away, and breathed out. I felt lighter. Even with what I was about to do, even knowing the risks, there was this flicker of hope inside me now, a spark that the library hadn't yet managed to smother. That night I returned to the library after hours. No students, no staff. Just me, the echoing silence and the old visitor's ledger sitting by the door. I set down my bag, pulled out a sterile scalpel, a lighter, a small bundle of sage, a fountain pen I'd cleaned and refilled with antiseptic. I wasn't going in. Unarmed, I made a shallow cut along my palm, just enough to draw a line of blood. Then, using the pen, I dipped it carefully and began writing my full name into the ledger. Each letter small, precise, deliberate. Not just an offering, a challenge. Signal. I know your game and I'm here to end it. I finished the last letter of my name with a trembling hand. The blood soaked slowly into the parchment of the visitor's log, blooming like ink in water. The second it settled, the air shifted. Not temperature, not pressure. Something deeper. The very rhythm of the building changed, like the library had taken a breath. I stood in the dark, the only light coming from my phone flashlight and the red glow of the exit sign. Outside, the wind howled faintly, rattling the ancient windows like a warning. I'd left my bag at the desk. Inside it, everything I thought I might need. A lighter, salt, sage, a mirror, a spool of thread, a small bottle of holy water I'd bought on a sketchy website that probably just sent me tap water with a sticker on it. It didn't matter. This wasn't about sacred tools. This was about intent. If the Book of Blood was truly sentient, if it had changed form, adapted, escaped the flame, then it wasn't just a cursed object anymore. It was an entity. And it knew my name. I returned to the catalog terminal and typed in the same keyword as before. Untitled. This time the result appeared instantly. Location. Aisle 8. Basement level. 1. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then reached for my flashlight and descended the stairs. Each step groaned beneath my feet, the creaking sound echoing against the stone walls. Basement level 1 was less terrifying than the third, cleaner, better lit. But the moment I crossed the threshold of the basement floor, every light overhead blinked off. The silence that followed was total. Even the hum of electricity was gone. Flashlight buzzed weakly, the beam flickering with static. I moved quickly now, no running, no panicking, just the steady march of someone who has made peace with consequences. I found aisle 8 easily, and there it was. Sitting at eye level on the shelf, waiting for me, was a new book. The cover was blank, the spine unlabeled. The leather was grey, rougher than before. And yet, it pulsed under my flashlight, slowly, like breathing. I reached out and lifted it. Immediately, the whispering began. This time not from within the book, but from behind me. I turned slowly, expecting shadows, expecting blood. Instead, I saw her, Marissa, she, stood at the far end of the aisle, exactly as I remembered her. Tousled hair, loose sweater, that necklace she always fidgeted with when she was nervous. She looked alive, real, warm. "Julian," she said, voice trembling, "I've missed you." I didn't respond. My grip on the book tightened. "This isn't real," I said out loud, more to myself than to her. She stepped forward. "I made a mistake. I was scared. I didn't know how to fix it." "You're not her." She stopped, her expression faltering, then changed. She tilted her head, her features shifting slightly. Not into a monster, but something uncanny. Like an AI-generated version of Marissa, almost perfect, but not quite. The eyes were too glassy, the smile too precise. She stepped closer, and with her came the sound of violins. I turned and saw them. The quartet stood at the opposite end of the aisle. Riley, Hannah, Devon, Theo. No wounds this time, no blood. They were dressed in concert attire, elegant, timeless. Riley's cello was slung over her back. Devon held a bow. They began to play, a soft, mournful piece that hummed through the air, like smoke, and behind them someone else appeared, a tall figure in a long coat, wide-brimmed hat, face hidden in shadow, hands long and skeletal, fingers bent like broken branches. The archivist. I didn't know how I knew the name. It wasn't in the rules. It had never been spoken aloud. But I knew. This was what the library served. Not a god, not a demon, a collector, a thing that thrived on despair and archived it, bottled it, read it aloud again and again for eternity. And I was its latest story. Marissa's image stepped closer. Her voice cracked now, more human. You don't have to be alone, Julian. You never had to be. We can rewrite it, together. I held up the book. You don't write my story, I said. Not anymore. And then I opened it. The pages inside were blank, all of them. Hundreds of thin grey sheets fluttered in the windless air, a wave of silence sweeping across them. Then the pages began to fill, lines of blood-red text forming in a language I didn't understand. And then my name, written again and again across the final page, like someone had been practicing it. Julian, Julian, Julian. As I stared, the letters began to twist, stretching, growing, reshaping into other words, other meanings. You belong to me, it read. No, I whispered. I struck the lighter. But before I could use it, the archivist raised its hand. The air tightened. The lighter flickered out. The quartet's music grew louder. Dissonant. Wrong. I dropped to one knee, trying to breathe, trying to think. If flame wouldn't work, I needed something truer, something the library couldn't bend. The rules. I opened my notebook and tore out the newest one, Rule 9. I held it up and shouted, "You made the rules." I followed them, and now I'm making one. The archivist paused, and I wrote, Rule 10. A story only has power if it's believed. I don't believe in you anymore. The moment the ink dried, the world shuddered. The archivist stumbled backward, as if struck. The book in my hands burned, not with fire but with light, searing gold that poured from its spine and bled through the shelves. The music stopped. Marissa screamed. But it wasn't a woman's voice. It was 100 voices howling as one. I stood holding the book high. You feed on belief, on pain, on memory, but I'm done giving you mine. I turned and shoved the book back onto the shelf, upside down. The library roared. Every light exploded into brilliance. Every shadow peeled back. And in the middle of the aisle, the archivist collapsed into ash, its coat disintegrating like paper in fire, its fingers scattering like brittle leaves. The book crumbled after it. Nothing remained. No smell, no smoke, just silence. And then, violin. Music again, soft, gentle, grateful. The quartet stood together, smiling. Riley bowed her head. Hannah mouthed something I couldn't hear. And then they were gone. The light didn't last. It flared, surged, devoured the dark, and then blinked out like a matchstick in the wind. The library settled into stillness again. But it was different. For the first time since I'd walked through those heavy oak doors months ago, the silence felt clean. No whispers slithered between the shelves. No shadows danced just beyond vision. The walls weren't watching. The air didn't taste like dust and secrets. It was just a room, just a place full of books. I stood for a long time in that empty aisle surrounded by ordinary shelves and ordinary quiet. My legs trembled beneath me. My lungs drew breath that didn't catch. And in the center of it all, where the archivist had fallen, where the book had burned, there was nothing, not even ash. No proof that anything had happened except me. I walked slowly back to the front desk, my footsteps echoing louder than they should. The green banker lamps had come back on. The system terminal glowed faintly with its blue login screen. For a moment, I thought I might collapse into the chair and sleep for a week, but I didn't. I walked to the visitor's ledger. It was still open, my name still written in blood, dried, now brown and quiet. But next to it, something new had appeared. In delicate cursive, one word had been added: free. I tore the page out and folded it into my coat pocket, and then I waited for morning. When Ms. Langley arrived, she didn't ask questions. She looked at me, really looked, and then gave a single nod, like she'd known all along this moment would come but hadn't dared to hope it would end well. "Did it work?" she asked quietly. "I think so," I said. "For now." She glanced at the empty shelves behind me, the quiet rows of books. "Then I guess you've earned your day shifts." I laughed, hoarse and brittle, and she actually smiled. "Take the rest of the week," she said. "Sleep, shower, do something normal. Define normal. Coffee with that girl you like." She turned and walked away without waiting for a response. But she was right. That Friday I met Elise at a cafe near the edge of campus. It was bright inside, full of windows and chatter and clinking mugs, the kind of place where people still believed the world made sense. "You look better," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "Define better," I replied, grinning. She laughed and reached across the table, brushing her fingers over my knuckles. "You didn't call for 3 days. I almost thought the library ate you." "It tried," I said, and left it at that. She didn't press, she never did. But she looked at me in that way people do when they know you've been somewhere they can't follow, and they're waiting for you to decide if you'll come back. Wanted to come back, so I did. I returned to the library the following week. Everything seemed quieter, more normal. The students were loud again. Someone was eating chips in the silent study zone. A group of freshmen were filming a TikTok in front of the stained glass window. Life had returned in all its ridiculous, irritating beauty, but I didn't let my guard down. I walked the stacks every shift, checked the catalog each morning for Untitled, kept the rules tucked in my back pocket like a shield, just in case, and one day while reshelving a volume on 19th century funeral rites, I noticed something new wedged between the shelves. A small notebook, leather-bound, untitled. I froze, but when I opened it, there was no whispering, no blood, just ink, old and fading, entries scrawled in different hands dated across decades. Each one was a librarian. Each one had written their own rules, their own stories, their own survival. I flipped to the last page and, with a shaking pen, added one more line to the chain. Rule 11. If you make it out, leave something behind, a warning, a truth, a map, because someone else will need it, and they deserve a chance. I closed the book and placed it gently back on the shelf. That night I dreamed of the quartet, but they weren't bleeding this time. They were seated on a stage, dressed in black and silver, under soft golden light. They played something slow, something aching and beautiful, a farewell song for a story finally reaching its end. Riley caught my eye. She nodded, and then they played me out of the dream, one note at a time. I still work at the library. I keep the lights on. I answer questions. I restock the coffee shelf in the staff lounge. And sometimes late at night I walk the aisles just to make sure nothing's moved. But the whispering has stopped. And when I pass the old stairwell in the back, the one behind the unmarked door, it's sealed shut now, like it was never there. Maybe. It'll stay that way, maybe not. But either way, if something opens again, if the darkness tries to write another story, I'll be ready, because I'm not just a librarian anymore. I'm the one who rewrites the rules. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't keep the fear to yourself. Leave a comment, smash that like button, and share this video with someone who dares to listen in the dark. We release terrifying true stories every week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. This is High Scare Stories, where nightmares don't end when the video does. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared.